I call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, April 11, 2024. All managers are present. Members of the public not here, so we can move to item 3, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Sando, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On the consent agenda, we have approval of the March 28th board meeting minutes. Resolution 2419, authorization to renew GIS and whiskey maintenance and license. 24020, authorization to submit the annual activity report to the Board of Water and Soil Resources and DNR. And 24021, authorization to trade in a district vehicle and purchase a new district vehicle. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Manager Olson moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Maxwell seconds. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I don't have a meeting to report on this time, so I'll turn to you, Manager Loftus, for the committee report.
Yes, thank you, President White. We met earlier this evening and we had the agenda item of Land and Water Partnership Program update. And this program has been in the works for a long time and officially started January 1st. And we received an update from staff on the workflow and coordination improvements that have been made, and also on some specific project opportunities that are in front of us. And there's periodic check-ins, and then there'll be formal recommendations to the board. So it's an ongoing program that provides technical and financial support for partner projects. So moving forward, it's brand new, but it's interesting to watch it take shape, and staff is working diligently with those who are applying, and look forward to seeing what comes in the future.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any other meetings or events managers would like to report on? You can see on the upcoming meeting and the event schedule, we'll be very busy this month. In addition to our regular meetings, there is the Metro Watersheds meeting, Three Rivers Park District State of the Parks, the Executive Committee meeting for the audit, a field trip for managers and staff and CAC members, and the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. And the liaisons are all noticed there. We'll move now to item 10.1, which is the permit. Maria Frege is presenting.
All right. Good evening, President White and Board of Managers. Tonight I will be providing a briefing on permit 24-075, the Centerpoint Energy Project located along County Road 84 in the city of Orono. The applicant is seeking a variance from the water by crossings and structures rule because they're not able to provide the minimum setback requirement of 100 feet from stream banks for 3 boreholes involving horizontal directional drilling. This presentation will provide an overview of the project, including the project location, proposed work, rule compliance, as well as the variance request. The presentation will end with time for questions and discussion before board deliberation. The yellow icon on the map is the project location in relation to the entire district. As you can see, the project sits within the Lake Minnetonka subwatershed and is located within the city of Orono. Our location is this yellow part here. This map shows a close-up of the project area, which is again highlighted in yellow. The project area is located north of Stubbs Bay on Lake Minnetonka along County Road 84, or Bayside Road, which runs along here. Tonkawa Road, which is right here. Leaf Street in this area, and then a small section on Old Crystal Bay Road south as well. The reason for this project is for the applicant to relocate their infrastructure to avoid conflict with the future Hedman County Road 84 paving replacement project that is proposed for this area. Along these roads, the applicant intends to install new 2 and 4 inch diameter natural gas pipelines using horizontal directional drilling. During the project, the applicant also intends to abandon their existing distribution line. Staff have reviewed the permit application and determined that the project triggers the district's erosion control, floodplain alteration, and water-by crossings and structures rules. All have been reviewed and found to be in compliance with the rule criteria. There are 2 locations where the applicant is directional drilling below a stream and cannot meet the 100-foot setback requirement of Section 3G of the water-by crossings and structures rule. There are 2 boreholes located at the Bayside Road site, which is right here, and then 1 borehole is located at the Leaf Street site here, which requires variance. Now that we've reviewed the project's location, scope of work, and the district rules triggered, I will now be reviewing the applicant's variance request. The variance and exceptions rule allows the Board of Managers to hear requests from variances from strict compliance with provisions of the district rules if the board determines that the request meets 5 criteria. Before I begin analyzing the variance criterion, I want to note a few things to consider and for you to consider and keep in mind as you review the applicant's variance request. The existing water-by crossings and structures rule requires pilot entrance and exit holes for directional drilling beneath a water body to observe a setback of at least 100 feet. The purpose of this section of the rule is to protect the stability and vegetative cover of the water body edge by keeping the boring and work limits at a distance. Over the last month, the applicant has worked with the district to adjust the project scope and review all sites that were within the 100-foot setback from any stream banks to reduce the number of sites prompting a variance request. The original scope of work included 2 additional boreholes that were within the 100-foot setback. Over time, the district has considered and issued a number of variances for utility companies that could not meet the setback requirement due to existing structures, utility alignments, and requirements to maintain utilities within the right-of-way. In addition, the district's proposed revision to the rule has received preliminary board approval and would allow district staff to accept a reduced setback if the applicant's work plan includes careful and diligent site plan practices to protect against the risk of damage to the bank or sediment release into the water body. The first criterion asks the applicant to describe that the need for variance comes out of special constraints that are inherent to the property. The applicant cannot route the gas pipeline under the road because it would cause conflict with the future road reconstruction project. And under industry standards, the utility must still be located within the right-of-way. However, it cannot be placed directly beneath the road as to not interfere with other public utilities located closer to property lines and to not damage the pipeline. Additionally, the main distribution line cannot be placed on private properties. At each location, there are specific site constraints that limit where the boreholes can be placed, and I will be outlining those specific site constraints later in the presentation. The second criterion asks the applicant to prove that the hardship was not created by the landowner or themselves. The applicant has explained that the hardship was not created by the landowner or the applicant themselves, as the project is necessary by the need to relocate the existing utilities out from under the roadway in anticipation for the future road reconstruction project. Additionally, as explained on the previous slide, the applicant is bound by the road right-of-way, public property boundaries, and specific site constraints. The third criterion asks the applicant to prove that granting the variance will not just serve as a convenience for them or for the project. The variance will not serve as a convenience to the applicant, as the applicant is providing a public utility service to the neighborhood by connecting property owners to the natural gas pipeline. As mentioned earlier, the applicant is moving the gas pipeline to avoid conflict with the future road reconstruction project and not out of convenience. Additionally, Hennepin County has an ordinance which states that, except in the case of an emergency, no excavations within the paved surface are allowed for 5 years after the new pavement surfacing. And not moving the utilities at this time could also cause public safety issues and service outages if utility lines are damaged or experience a future failure. The fourth criterion asks the applicant to prove that there are no feasible alternatives to the activity requiring a variance. The applicant has explored alternative options for both locations that cannot meet the 100-foot setback requirement, and none of which are feasible. Moving any of the proposed boreholes would interfere with the existing infrastructure and property parcel boundaries, and the applicant has provided 2 additional general alternatives as well as site-specific constraints. The first alternative is to not proceed with the project. Not installing the distribution or service lines could result in customer connection issues, public safety concerns, as well as future road and gas line maintenance issues. The second alternative is to use an open trench method instead of horizontal directional drilling. This would cause an even larger area of disturbance and pose a greater threat of sediment going into nearby surface waters. Now I will go through the two sites to demonstrate the lack of feasible alternatives at the two specific locations. Along Bayside Road, two boreholes prompt a variance. One of these boreholes is located to the north of the stream. It's indicated by the white circle. And one is located to the south, indicated by this white circle. The southern borehole is located 62 feet away from the stream, and the northern borehole is located 74 feet away from the stream bank. The northern borehole cannot be relocated because it is associated with an existing house gas meter. Due to the alignment of the distribution line, which is again kind of going north and south here, moving the southern borehole to the east or to the west would not bring the site outside of the 100-foot setback and would still require a variance. Additionally, where the southern borehole is currently placed, the road grade would make it difficult for any sediment from the borehole to flow north into the stream, as it would have to actually go over the road grade. Along Leaf Street, there is one borehole located to the east of the road which prompts a variance, located here, again highlighted in the white circle. This borehole is situated 45 feet from the stream bank, and moving the proposed borehole or associated service line isn't feasible, as moving it further to the south would cause the service line to cross a wetland as well as a water body, and it would still be crossing the water body. And moving the borehole or service line to the east would place the borehole within a wetland and outside the public right-of-way. And moving the borehole to the north would still result in crossing a water body as the stream flows throughout the entire property boundary here. And therefore, any spot on the north or south side would still be within 100 feet of the stream and thus requiring a variance. Additionally, where the borehole is currently placed, the road grade would also make it difficult for any sediment from the borehole to flow west into the stream, as again, it would have to cross the entire road. The fifth criterion asks the applicant to prove that granting the variance will not go against the intention of the Water Body Crossings and Structures Rule. The purpose of the Water Body Crossings and Structures Rule are to discourage the placement of utilities within contact of the beds and banks of water bodies, to preserve the ecological integrity of the riparian and aquatic habitat, and to encourage the improvement of wildlife passage and habitat. The applicant is meeting the intent of the rule for a number of reasons. The applicant has cited that no work will be done within the bed or bank of the two streams, and that a clearance of 3 feet beneath the bed of all streams will be provided. The ecological integrity of the streams will not change from existing to post-construction conditions. All borehole locations near the stream on each property are set back as far as possible to prevent destabilization of the bank, sedimentation into the stream, and to prevent permanent impacts. And the applicant has provided an erosion and sediment control plan that shows redundant best management practices, or BMPs, that will be taken at borehole locations within the 100-foot setback. These BMPs are indicated as the yellow partial squares surrounding the boreholes. The use of multiple BMPs will minimize any potential impacts to nearby water bodies. In summary, the applicant has applied for Minnehaha Creek Watershed District permit for water body crossings and structures, and variance to providing the required minimum setback of 100 feet for 3 borehole sites. Staff is recommending approval contingent on the board's approval of the variance because staff found all other requirements to have been met. Staff finds the variance arguments to be sound, accurate, and have justification, and on that basis pass on the variance to the board for their judgment and their review of the variance. Thank you, President White and Board Managers, for listening to this briefing on permit 24-075 and the applicant's variance request. If anyone has any questions or comments, I'm happy to address them now.
Thank you. First, we'll take up the variation. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Manager Miller moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Olson seconds. Questions or discussion on this? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then moving on to the permit with the conditions stated that we've approved the variance and there'll be reimbursement of fees. Is there a motion to approve the permit?
So moved.
Manager Miller moves. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll take Manager Hitchmody second. Any questions? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I guess not. And we'll allow you some extra time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We spoke a little bit beforehand, but I wanted to use this time to let you all know that I will actually be leaving the district to pursue another opportunity. I've been offered a position with the City of Lakeville as an environmental resources specialist, and very excited. A little bit more aligned with kind of my career goals as well as personal and professional strengths. My last day will be this next Friday, the 19th. I want to extend an enormous thank you to all of you and to the organization for all the amazing opportunities I've been provided, the guidance and continuous support I've been given as well. And I'm very sad to leave, but I'm going to be looking back on my time here with very fond memories, and I want to note that and again extend a huge thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
And to us, thank
Best
you.
of luck.
Yeah.
All the best.
We wish you the very best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for working here.
Sherry, can I just
Yes,
take a
of
moment
course,
to build on that? I just wanted to thank Maria for her service to Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, and just, I mean, it kind of comes through in the presentation, but she's just shown great care and thoughtfulness and diligence in how she's approached every and all permit that's crossed her desk. She's had some kind of trials and tribulations and got thrown into the deep end on some complicated permits when the manager left, and I think it's been a consistent component of her character to just really always support the team and be there for a backstop for the team, raise her hand and lean in and help everybody, whether it's inside or outside of permitting. So we will miss her like she'll miss us, but we wish her the very best as she joins her illustrious alumni and heads over to Lakeville, which is what I hear is a 10 to 12 minute commute.
Yes.
Also.
Whoa.
Yeah. Very
That's
nice.
enough reason right there, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, James. Good wishes to you.
Thank you very much. So I'm just trying to figure out how to end this.
Mr. Wolf will be presenting item 11.1, Resolution 2422.
I don't know where the. I don't know.
There we go. Mouse got lost, sorry. Okay. Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. Tonight we have authorization to amend 5 vegetation maintenance contracts to extend work through 2024. First, we'll go through a little bit of background, look at our groupings, the scope of work, why vegetation maintenance, and then talk a little bit more in detail about the 2024 extension, and then have a look at the budget. So, beginning in 2004, Project Maintenance and Land Management has coordinated with local and regional contractors to manage vegetation at a number of district project sites. The original contract involved management of 4 areas around stormwater ponds. Since 2004, the program has grown to include 27 sites as new projects have been constructed or come out of warranty. Projects are distributed throughout the watershed, as you can see, and have been placed into 5 management groupings, which we'll look at here in just a second. So the 27 sites are divided into 5 project groupings. The Minnehaha Creek Greenway Group, which is 4 sites managed by Landbridge Ecological. 6 Mile Marsh Prairie and Laketown Wetland Group, managed by Prairie Restorations. Pond Buffers and Shoreline Group, 11 sites, managed also by Landbridge. The West and Southwest Group, 8 sites, managed by Minnesota Native Landscapes. And the County Road 101 Shoreline and Jennings Bay Wetland Group, managed by Natural Shore Technologies. So what do these services entail? The vegetation management contracts contain a wide variety of tasks, including broad and spot mowing, herbicide treatment, shrub and tree pruning, woody species removal, supplemental plantings, overseeding in the fall, mulch, and monitoring and reporting. There's also 2 optional tasks that staff will be reviewing. is prescription burn and enhanced seating at the Rye property, and a prescription burn at the Gould property. So why? Why is vegetation management a part of our program? The sites managed by project maintenance and land management vary widely in their use and biology. Some sites, such as the 6 Mile Marsh Prairie on the left, feature a natural design and are managed for native species growth and ecosystem health in the form of native species and brush removal and prescribed burns. Others, such as the Cottageville Park site on the right, are built on a more constructed design where vegetation is managed with a specified aesthetic involving mulching, weeding, and herbicides. Now looking at the contract extensions, a proposed 2023 vegetation maintenance reevaluation was not completed last year due to delays in programming from boardwalk reconstruction, manager onboarding, me, and staff departures. We look to examine the groupings in detail, and as part of our data management system implementation, utilize a ranked tiered system to determine which projects will be managed in which ways to meet the design and usage needs of the district in 2025 and beyond. In order to provide adequate staff time and resources to this endeavor, we're seeking an additional 1-year contract extension for 2024. The 5 contracts were originally awarded via a competitive quote process in 2020 and 2021. A 1-year extension was authorized by the board for 2023 on the provision to do this reevaluation that was unfortunately not completed. For the proposed extension, quotes were requested from each of the current contractors by management group. The Minnehaha Greenway sites with a total cost of $39,544, 6 Mile Marsh Prairie and Laketown Wetland Group, total cost of $32,285, pond buffers and shoreline sites with total cost of $49,172, the west and southwest sites with a total cost of $61,285, and the County Road 101 shoreline and Jennings Bay Wetland site for a total cost of $7,150. Looking at the budget, the total cost for management of the 27 sites is $189,436. This contract cost represents a 6% increase on the year, which through conversations with Stantec, staff has determined is aligned or below industry-wide inflationary costs for 2024, which have typically ranged from 8 to 14%. Additionally, this is aligned with a 6.5% increase seen from 2022 to 2023. And this is within the current 2024 PML and vegetation maintenance budget of $190,000. And so with that, we have Resolution 24-022, authorization to amend 5 vegetation maintenance contracts to extend work through 2024. I'll ask the board for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution? Manager
So-
Hitchlotti, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Maxwell. Any questions for Mr. Wolf?
Are we confident that next year will be in a bidding process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have the plan is to start the revision process at the end of the inspection season in September, so we'll have 4 or 5 months of time in the program to review and then be willing and ready to take competitive quotes in early 2025.
Thanks.
Yes.
Manager Sando.
I just wanted to bring one point to our group is that I live kitty corner from Arden Park, and this is before I was involved with MCWD, and that was a tough year. They were building Arden Park, and it was a drought year. The Prairie Restoration overextended themselves. It would be gone days at a time, and they would leave their trays of small plantings in the sun and be gone in extended points of time. I was just a citizen at the time. I would call them, and they kind of blew it off. And they were not a reliable source the way they conducted their affairs at Arden Park, and they burned up, or a lot of plants were burned up. Just want to bring that to your attention, and probably just be aware of this and be watchful how they conduct their affairs. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Manager Sando. We'll make sure to be checking in regularly with their work this season.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other
Bill had a
questions?
question.
Manager
I got
Olson?
one. Do you have one? Go ahead.
Manager Maxwell.
Was there 2 controlled burn sites in there?
Yes, that's correct.
And who really controls that? Is it, gives it the go-ahead? Is it the Watershed District, the Corps of Engineers, or the contractor itself? And who's liable in case this thing really got out of hand?
Well, the contractors all carry insurance, but the watershed we would work in partnership with them to determine when an appropriate time for the burn would
That
be
was
to
kinda
be
my
completed.
question.
Yep.
So we'll tell them to go ahead or not go ahead for the controlled burns.
Yes.
All right.
Yep. It's discretionary. Yep.
Manager Olson?
Do we get a final report from each site that says this is exactly what we turned out to do?
Yeah, President-wide Board of Managers, yes, that's as part of the monitoring and reporting portion of the tasks in the work plans. We receive a final report at the end of each growing season, management season.
Okay, thank you.
Manager Miller?
I'm just an amateur observer of these maintenance projects in various parks. They're doing one over in, I don't know what, I think it's called Mud Lake or something like that. It's not our project, it's Edina's. And I've never seen anything so messy. They've got these grinders in front of tractors, and it kind of grinds it. It knocks stuff over. Great big pieces are shooting in the air all over the place. And I don't even know how vegetation can regrow in the area. And they indiscriminately just cut down everything. It's supposed to be buckthorn, but anything that's in the way gets cut down. Whereas over at Minnehaha Preserve, I mean, it's really done well. The brush is hauled out when they cut it, and it's and the trees that were planted are attended to. So the contrast is just pretty great.
Manager Miller, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Anything else? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, Mr. Wolf. We'll move to item 11.2, Ms. Christopher, Resolution 24023.
Thank you, Manager White, managers. Excited to be here tonight requesting adoption of the revised rules as well as authorization to release responses to comments received during the comment period. I'd like to start with just a brief recap of the purpose and goals of the rule revision process and kind of the path we've taken to get here before then providing an overview of the more substantive comments we received in the final proposed edits, and then wrap up by framing the request for action. So as you all know, the rulemaking process originated from the Strategic Action Plan in 2018 to align all of our programs around balanced urban ecology. And knowing that permitting program is a big part of how we engage with the land use community, we ran a process with staff, CAC, and the board to evaluate the program, identify opportunities for improvement, and this including looking at the rules themselves. And through these discussions, we identified the 3 goals on your screen for the rule revision process, which were to simplify and streamline the language and process to improve customer service and clarity, to improve program efficiency and effectiveness by better aligning our time and resources with natural resource risk and opportunity. And finally, by aligning our scope and standards with the MPCA and other entities for better consistency and compliance. And so following that direction setting process in fall of 21, the board approved a scope of work to begin working on the rule revisions. And from there, staff worked with legal counsel and the district engineer to draft the rule text. And then in 2022, the district created a technical advisory committee made up of representatives from our cities, counties, and other partner agencies to review and vet the rules as part of the broader Land and Water Partnership Initiative. From there, we integrated edits and feedback from the TAC into the revisions, and the rules were then distributed for public comment in December. And that comment period closed February 1st, and staff has been since working with legal counsel and district engineer to consider those comments, draft responses, and associated revisions to the rules to get them in final form. And so 9 comment letters were received during the comment period, and those were provided to the board at the February PPC meeting. And at that meeting, we discussed the more substantive comments and the direction that staff was planning to go in responding to those comments. Since then, we did also have a recent coordination meeting with the Met Council Interceptor Engineering team, and they provided a few additional informal comments that have now been integrated. And all of those are listed in the table in your packet, organized by commenter. And that table includes our proposed response and an indication of whether or not a rule edit was made to address that comment. And so if it pleases the board, I can step through and summarize the more substantive comments from each agency and the changes made in response. This will be somewhat of a repeat from February PPC, but I know a couple managers were not present at that meeting, and there's been kind of some of these more recent comment additions. Plan to keep it pretty high level, and if there are any that I don't cover that the board has questions on, certainly feel free to stop me. So first, with CenterPoint Energy, they provided a couple comments that were focused primarily on understanding how temporary impacts from utility work trigger the floodplain and stormwater rules. And our response clarifies that stormwater would not be triggered in these instances. And for floodplain, we want to consider or continue reviewing these projects just to ensure there is no net fill and that there's proper erosion and sediment control practices. But generally, these projects will be very easy to comply with the requirements and should be processed really efficiently. So no changes proposed for that set of comments. For the city of Minneapolis, there were a few kind of clarifying questions and suggestions. One comment that I wanted to highlight, which we also discussed in committee, stemmed from concerns with the Edina's Morningside project and potential for negative water quality impacts with the original design to Bede-Makaska. And so they requested that the district consider adding requirements to the stormwater rule to ensure that projects have no negative impact to downstream water bodies. And the response here reflects discussions that were had throughout the TAC process that essentially addressing this concern would require a pretty significant shift in the scope and standards of the current rule, and was viewed as being kind of outside of the scope of this round of rule revisions, but also that we acknowledge the concern of increased runoff and potential for downstream impacts, and are planning to kind of tie those into the discussions that we'll be having coming up with the climate planning and engagement process to explore different policy solutions to that concern. And in previous discussions, the commenter was generally comfortable with that approach, but wanted to have their concern on the record. For the city of Plymouth, this was the highest volume of comments, and there's just a few I wanted to highlight that were more related to recommended changes to scope or standards. The first was a suggestion to change the freeboard requirement under the floodplain and stormwater rules from using the low opening to using low floor, as many cities do. And so this is another thing that was specifically discussed through the TAC process. And the general consensus was that it made sense to keep our requirements as it is. Part of the reason being that trying to align with FEMA and DNR standards would make the rule quite a bit more complicated, as the DNR has different requirements for different types of structures and different floodway or flood zones. And so in some cases it would require or would result in an increase in standards and a decrease in other instances. And the general preference was to keep ours as it is, as it's not really creating any problems or significant confusion based on our experience. Another from the city of Plymouth was a request to clarify kind of the stormwater rule trigger related to grading or changing land contours in a way that could change the direction, peak rate, and volume of runoff. And this was an area that we agreed there could be better clarity, so we have added language in that section to clarify that this is intended really for mass grading or significant changes to land contours, not sort of any land disturbance of any kind. Also under the stormwater rule, there was a recommendation that for linear projects, the requirement should be to provide water quality treatment to the extent feasible, which is similar to how the MS4 permit is written. And we received similar comments from Hennepin County and the city of Richfield, just raising the concern that it can be difficult to meet the phosphorus control standard, particularly for linear projects. And so the proposed requirement is consistent with the current rule, which requires abstraction to the extent feasible. And then if you can't provide abstraction, you have to provide equivalent phosphorus control. And this typically means creating a filtration basin that's twice as big or holds twice the volume. And so knowing that linear projects are often more space constrained, staff felt that it was a reasonable request or would be a reason to provide that additional flexibility for linear projects. And so we have revised that language to match more closely with the MS4 permit approach of requiring treatment to the maximum extent feasible. And finally, the other City of Plymouth comment that I wanted to highlight, sorry, hard to breathe through this mask, is for the wetland rule, and there were a couple of comments related to concern that the buffer widths for single-family homes may make some properties unbuildable. And a change is not proposed here for a few reasons. So there's been there's no change from the current to the proposed rule in terms of buffer widths. And in our experience, applicants have been able to comply without needing a variance. And the buffer requirements for single-family homes are already smaller than for other land use types, kind of with that concern in mind. And there's also a statement in the rule explicitly stating that buffers will not render the property unbuildable. So there's a few different ways that that can be navigated where it hasn't resulted in the need for variances. Next, for the City of Richfield, they had some comments, again, kind of requesting clarifications or better aligning with state language. And otherwise, as I mentioned previously, Richfield had noted a similar concern to Plymouth regarding the challenges of meeting the phosphorus control requirement. And so this has been addressed with that edit that I mentioned earlier. For Hennepin County, under the stormwater rule, one of their comments questioned whether the common plan of development provision should apply for linear projects and whether the MPCA applies it this way. And so in determining our treatment requirements under the stormwater rule, the district aggregates all activity that it finds to constitute a common plan of development. So under shared ownership, regardless if it's on a different time scale or on multiple parcels. And so this is a requirement of the MS4 permit as well. And the PCA has developed some pretty detailed guidance on how to evaluate whether something's part of a common plan or not. And so based on that guidance, we confirmed it does apply to linear projects. But in looking into this further, we did make one revision to eliminate what we call kind of the look-back period, which looked at all impervious from the past 10 years in aggregate. And really that language had kind of the same intent of trying to kind of prevent applicants from breaking a project into phases to kind of get, kind of sneak in under the thresholds of the rule requirements. And so with the new guidance that exists for determining whether something's a common plan, we felt that kind of that look-back period was redundant and no longer necessary. So that was proposed to be cut. And then also from Hennepin County, again, they flagged that similar concern about the phosphorus control standard for linear projects. And so that, again, has been addressed by the proposal to add that provision about maximum extent feasible. Moving on then to the Department of Health. Their comments all related to protection of drinking water wells. So requesting some additional infiltration prohibitions within a certain distance of wells, as well as a requirement that dredge spoils can't be placed within a certain distance. We felt this seemed reasonable and that there is data available on private wells, so that can be easily integrated into our review process. So those requests have been added to the rules. Moving on then to the DNR's comments. There's really two main comments from them. Under the water body crossings rule, there was a request that replacement of structures that control public water elevations not be eligible for fast track review, as those will generally require an individual permit from the DNR. So as proposed in the rule, in-kind replacement of pipes or culverts would be treated as fast track, which they still get the same level of review, but essentially there just is no public notice requirement. And they're also not required to provide the analysis of alternatives, because presumably replacing in kind is generally going to be your minimal impact option. And so because the district generally does not want to make its approvals contingent on another agency's review, we prefer not to add this exception. However, we will be establishing guidance for staff to help flag those projects so that they can be directed to the DNR for an individual permit. And second, the DNR flagged a potential confusing or potentially conflicting language regarding whether riprap projects are required to meet the no-rise standard. And so under the rules, riprap is not considered to be floodplain fill and therefore not required to provide compensatory storage. However, if it's in a stream, it has to meet the no-rise standards to show that it's not encroaching and causing high water upstream or downstream, which seemed to be kind of at the heart of the DNR's concern. And so with that clarification, we didn't view there being a conflict or a need for a change there. Moving on then to the Pollution Control Agency. Staff met with their stormwater team and determined that a couple of changes were needed to fully comply with the MS4 permit. The main one being that the MS4 permit requires that on-site treatment be considered first before allowing off-site or regional treatment. And the MS4 permit does still allow off-site treatment if on-site is found to be cost prohibitive. And that's, often, I think, pretty easy to demonstrate, and so we don't feel that's going to be a significant barrier to using regional treatment where we think that makes sense, since that is often our preferred approach. And so we have made those revisions to ensure that we're complying fully with the MS4 permit. Moving on then to the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. Here again, there was some, I think, simple clarification type of comments. And the more substantive one was similar to the one from Minneapolis about kind of downstream impacts, and was addressed in a similar way. And then finally, as I mentioned, we met recently with Met Council staff regarding their interceptor projects, and they provided a few comments related to the water body crossing rule. One was seeking clarification as to whether the clearance and setbacks requirements apply for utility crossings if the water body is enclosed in a pipe or culvert. And because that really is not the intent, the intent is to protect the bed and bank of water bodies, we agreed that these shouldn't apply where it is in a pipe. And so we've added clarification that the 3-foot clearance requirement does not apply in these situations where a utility is crossing under a pipe or culvert, and the 100-foot setback would only apply to the nearest open channel. And then finally, the other comment from them was related to the requirement that sanitary sewer crossings incorporate automatic valves, diversions, or other features to avoid sanitary discharge in the event of a line failure. And it was recommended that this apply only to force mains and siphons and not to gravity sewer pipes, which generally have a lower risk of sanitary discharge. And there was also a concern that introducing mechanical control or diversion piping on a gravity sewer line would be prone to mechanical failure or debris obstruction. And we felt this seemed like a reasonable request, and the rule has been revised accordingly. So those are the ones that I felt were more substantive to highlight, but are there any others that the board had questions on that I didn't cover? Yeah.
What does the reference to informal with Met Council mean? It's the only one that had that.
Yeah, sure. Manager Olson, managers, that was just sort of their own framing, that it was sort of suggestions. It wasn't, it came after the comment period, and so There's
Okay,
more
so that's
friendly
their-
suggestions in our meetings, so, yep,
That's their label.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Before further discussion, may I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Manager
Second.
Maxwell, second by Manager Hejmati. Your question, Manager?
No, no questions.
Okay. Other questions for Ms. Christopher? Well, this is a red letter day. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you so much
absolutely.
for all that you others have done.
I just want to comment that you've done a really commendable job, being very thorough and very careful, and you really, in the process of doing this, I can see you really enhanced the relationships with the agencies that you've worked with. You've used this as a way to form stronger connections. And I see that, and I want to commend you on doing that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Is this by any chance a whereas record?
There are quite a few there. It's been a long road.
We
Thank you
didn't
for
know
your
it was a
work.
contest.
Yeah.
We'll have to start one.
Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Well, I should just make one more note for the record too, with regard to the effective date of April 29th. The intent would be that any applications received before the 29th will be reviewed under the current rules, and any applications received on or after the 29th will be subject to the new rules, just so that's clear how that will be handled.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll recognize Mr. Hayman for item 12.1.
Just going to quickly hand these out. You don't need to read them, they're just for reference during the discussion. Thank you. Great. Good evening, Chair White and managers. We have hit some recent deadlines with the 325 Blake Road redevelopment and restoration project, and thought it would be a good time to bring an update to the board just to discuss the current status of the project. A reminder is sort of what's been going on over the last 12 months. The board will recall that in May of 2023, we approved final plans and specifications for both the 325 Blake Road project as well as Cottageville Park Phase 2, and finalized project agreements with the City of Hopkins for Cottageville Park Phase 2. We've essentially paused those design efforts and continued working with both the developer, Alatus, and the City of Hopkins to continue planning for these projects to come together as they are integrally linked on the site. Moving into the fall of 2023 to assist Alatus further in its efforts to advance the development, we amended the purchase agreement for a second time. The first purchase agreement amendment was for the Chorus building to allow for an earlier takedown for that LIHTC funding. The second amendment was executed in October and essentially identified the secondary development partners of Artesa and Ron Clark, modified that Phase 1B property to include the townhomes and the senior co-op, along with that first multifamily, moved the mid-rise tower to being the Phase 2 development, identified the purchase price as being consistent but for the two phases, and then extended the feasibility period to March 31st of 2024 to allow them to move through the city's bonding and updated PUD process, and provided for a fee of $100,000 to the district. They were able to use the earnest money, so to pull it from the earnest money, but it would not be assigned as earnest money any longer, and pay for the fees associated with that. So following the amendment, Alatus began working with their secondary development partners to move through those city processes. We've been providing support through that effort over the course of the last 6 months through liaison engagement, biweekly project meetings, at neighborhood meetings, as well as presentations that we've provided to the city council. So that brings us to our conversation this evening. Following the February bond approval and PUD update that now reflects the senior housing and the townhomes on the plat, the focus from Alatus has been on securing its capital partner for the multifamily components of the project. and continuing its ongoing conversations with the project partners around construction coordination and how the site takedown will unfold. Regarding the latter, we've been working with HDR and meeting with Alatis, Artesa, Ron Clark, and some of their engineers and architects to really plan for that site coordination and construction coordination, scheduling and phasing as that progresses. Regarding the purchase and sale agreement and the second amendment, they've been working with an identified capital partner, Kane Anderson, to secure the equity investment portion of the development. They do have a debt partner in Wintrust Bank already identified or under contract. So the amended purchase and sale agreement identifies that March 31st date as the expiration of the feasibility period. So that date passing indicates that Alatis is waiving its right to terminate, and their desire is to move forward with closing, and triggers the deadline of then April 3rd, which was 3 days after the feasibility period, at which time the buyer is to deposit $100,000 in earnest money. We did not receive that payment by the end of business on April 3rd, so on April 4th, we delivered the letter that you have in front of you this evening to Alatis, just detailing that the expiration period had ended, and so that date having passed meant that they'd waived their right to terminate, and that the April 3rd deadline had passed as well, at which time the $100,000 should have been deposited as earnest money. So we did indicate to them that that was a failure to make the timely deposit as earnest money was a default under the purchase and sale agreement, and we would be having a conversation with the board as to our contractual rights as it relates to the purchase and sale agreement. We also did disclose other deliverables under the PSA that had not been provided yet, such as the REOA, stormwater offset components, etc. And lastly, then we, like I noted, indicated we would come to the board this evening for an update and a discussion. So we did receive an update from Alatis this week, and in response to the letter, they provided a third amendment. And at this time, staff would suggest that the board consider closed session to discuss the amendment and its negotiation posture. And if the board agrees, I know that Lewis Smith can lead the board into that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Heyman. Assuming that we will go into closed session, I invite the staff who need to stay, remain, and everyone else is excused.
Do you need a motion to go in closed session?
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Oh, we're gonna wait.
Yeah, just. Thanks, everyone. Great meeting.
I didn't hear what,
Is there a motion to go into closed session?
so moved. Is the camera changed? So
I believe it's recorded, but in a separate box.
all right.
There's a motion to go into closed
Second.
session. Second for Manager Maxwell. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are in closed session.
Great. Thank you, Madam.
Can we have a motion to go back into open session?
So moved.
Manager Olson moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager
know,
Miller?
I'm
Those-
having too much fun.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
That's, nice work, Mike.
excellent, actually. The administrator's report. Oh, what, any inquiries, issues, or ideas? No, okay.
I'll file them with the secretary.
All right, fair deal. Mr. Whisper.
Yep, President White, managers, a few updates this evening under the administrator's report. We've got a few personnel reports to make. I think some of this trickled out through committee, but we've concluded interviews for
Thanks,
positions in policy planning with Becky's group. So be in addition to Kate as a policy planner and a water resource scientist in Brian's group for research and monitoring. And both Brian and Becky have made offers that have been accepted. The person that's been accepted for policy planning begins in June. They're both transplants, so that person's going to be relocating from New Mexico. We've got a research and monitoring person that's moving from the East Coast. They're going to be arriving late August, early September. And there was a second research and monitoring candidate that was very interested in project management, so we're taking some informational interviews with them and Mike, and we'll see how that shakes out since he continues to have a vacancy. We heard tonight that Maria Fregis is leaving, and we are in the process of posting for permitting manager, so we'll probably double up there and post for permitting technician as well. I think that kind of rounds it out in terms of the comings and goings. Then we've got the stayings. Jill Sweet hit her 10-year anniversary recently. I wish she was here, but we can maybe recognize her at a subsequent meeting. But we're going to be having a little bit of a party for her at our next all-hands meeting. We have our all-staff retreat tomorrow, but I just wanted to say a few words. They're really Brian's words that he sent out to all staff. But Jill started with the Watershed District in 10 years ago as an aquatic invasive species person, really focused on searching for zebra mussels in Lake Minnehaha. And over the years, what Brian has said is Jill's really embodied the phrase Jill of all trades, excelling in a variety of roles within the organization. She's become our resident aquatic vegetation expert. I didn't know this until he put this out on the all staff thread, but she's conducted more vegetation surveys than any other government worker in the state of Minnesota. So there's some esteem there. And along the way, he said her dedication and expertise have led to the discovery of an extremely rare plants, including the bearded stonewort, samples of which are now housed in the New York Botanical Garden. So she's nationally renowned for her plant prowess. Beyond that very specialized expertise, coming in with aquatic invasive species background and some of the vegetation work, she's just really impacted the district through a diverse skill set. She oversees all of our routine water quality sampling now with the seasonals, now that Kaylee has moved into project planning. She managed the conclusion of the 6 Mile Creek Halstead Bay Carp implementation plan. She streamlined all of Brian's research and monitoring workflows, learning coding along the way, and developing field apps through her coding for data entry, and just really streamlining their whole program. And she's responsible for all the fleet management too. So she's not in front of the board all the time. I think when she is, she's been talking about carp, but she's basically the horsepower behind Brian keeping the entire 2-person research and monitoring program running. So we're really, really grateful for Jill for sticking with us through all of the different twists and turns that research and monitoring programs take. And she's just a real value-added asset. Wanted to celebrate her this evening. A few other things, the water levels. Josh did get out to Grays Bay Dam this week with the city of Minnetonka and take the stop logs out. We've gotten just over 1.5 inches of precip in the last 7 days, and so we have been removed from the drought classification by the National Weather Service. Josh tells me the 30-day forecast has a higher likelihood of more rain. So we'll see what happens to water levels over time. Right now, Minnetonka is at 928.9, and the creek's running at 23 cubic feet per second. So the lake's still sitting about 6 inches below a point where we'd be forced to discharge. We have the option for bleeding out some flow for base flow if it gets really dry. We'll get a little bit more rain on the lake, sort of the discretionary operation mode. And we have been getting inquiries about when are we going to let water out of Minnetonka and get the creek flowing. So a timely update there. And I think that is, there's maybe one other note Alex left for me here somewhere, and which I'm not really prepared to kind of get into because it's super long and I haven't prepared. But on Google Maps you can name a place, and in 2019, Alex and others had noticed that Google Maps had really few data points of interest on Minnehaha Creek in the Greenway area. And I think Manager Miller's brought up, wayfinding signage and how do we generate interest. And another way that people wayfind is through Google Maps. And so staff submitted some specific pin drops to serve as routing and wayfinding on sort of a digital level. And I'm just going to kind of tick through. We got a note from Google. He gets one a year, just how many views pins get. And he put a bunch of caveat language in here. It's not just if somebody opens an app and our pin is in there, they actually have to click on it, so they're interested in it, or they've specifically searched for the Minnehaha Preserve. So after we put that into Google, in 2020 we had 50,000 views of the Minnehaha Creek Greenway. In 2021 we had 100,000 views. 2022 we had 200,000 views, and last year we had 400,000 views of the Minnehaha Creek Greenway. And that's people clicking on the pin to figure it out or directly keep
They aren't
searching
showing
it.
up over there.
Yeah, there's not 400,000 people. over there, but I thought that was kind of an interesting data point, and it just came through from
Doubling.
Google.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Wow.
That's all I have for the admin
Where,
report tonight.
where is your retreat?
We're having the retreat at somewhere in the West End Business Center that's sort of designed for retreats, so over in St. Louis Park. And we're going to be doing work planning, so we're going through, each program is outlining their 18 to 24-month work plan. We're breaking down the strategic action plan, and we're figuring out sort of top priorities and how all of the program's workflow fits together. And it's a way to generate awareness for everybody on staff in terms of what the priorities are and how all the work is going to move.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds
The
great.
meeting's adjourned.